You know, there's no really good way to start a video like this, so I'm just gonna dive headfirst into this. I think there should be no age restriction on the presidency. I'm gonna let you sit with that for a second.
Take a minute, take it in.
Now, initially, before I picked up this book, I, like many people, thought, you know what? The founding fathers laid out 35 as a minimum age requirement. Surely that's not an arbitrary number. Surely they have a reason for doing so. That was until I picked up Young World by Soman Chainani. Basically, the book is about a 17-year-old kid named Benton Young who makes a video and uploads it to YouTube, jokingly telling people to write him in for the presidency. The only problem is that people don't take it as a joke, and he is unknowingly elected to be the next president. Already, that's a very interesting premise, right? Like 17-year-old and everything that comes with being a teenager, now having to serve the highest position in office, and yet at the same time, knowing what this book is about, knowing what it was trying to do, it seems that the conversation is currently being derailed on GOODREADS because of one relationship in this book. Basically, the reason that our main character ends up jokingly running for office is because the girl that he likes tells him that he's a do-nothing, that he stands for nothing, that he needs to have a cause to rally behind, right? And spoiler, said girl is his AP government teacher. So in this video, I wanted to talk about it. I want to go into the plot of this book, what really stuck out to me, what I think is working. And of course, I will be talking about the controversial elements of this book, giving some added context and my interpretation to hopefully shed some light for all the people that left negative reviews on this book. Because ultimately, as you'll understand as I go throughout this video, is I think it's just a depiction. It's a portrayal of said relationship. It's not an endorsement, which is a key distinction that we need to have when we pick up books that have controversial and polarizing material. So without further ado, hello, welcome back. It is a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say. And today I will be reviewing Young World by Soman Chainani. Let me give you a brief summary about this book. I'm approaching this video in a very conversational way because I think that's the best way to really engage with it, talk about it. The only better way that we could really discuss this book is if we were actually in the same room talking to each other. Because right now, like I'm just sitting in front of a camera, no one's responding to me. And in general, it's hard to have a conversation on the internet. Like truly, I'm just shouting into the void. But genuinely, I want you guys to leave me comments, respond to the things I'm saying. I'm gonna try and get to everyone's comments if I can, because this is genuinely a book that I think you need to talk it out with someone if you're going to understand it. Sorry, I'm yapping. Anyway, Young World, brief summary, is the story of Benton Young, who is 17 years old, and he's in love with this girl from his school. For the first, I'm gonna say quarter of the book, you don't even know her name. They just refer to her as the girl. So he's in love with this girl, and he's been trying to ask her out, you know, get to know her a little bit more, but she called him a do-nothing. Basically, she accused him of not having anything to stand for. He didn't really have any politics that he was particularly passionate about. Like, he was just another snot-nosed kid, essentially. So kind of spurred on by this insult, he decides to create a YouTube video where he essentially tells people to vote for him for president. They are in the middle of an election year. He makes this video. It ends up going viral. Now, initially when it goes viral, he still takes it as a joke. Like, he's doing fundraisers, he's going around touring or whatever, but he doesn't actually think he's going to win. He even casts a vote, which is funny and ironic because it's not actually going to count for the presidency because he's not 18. So he casts a fake vote for himself, and then lo and behold, the night of the election, he finds out that he actually won. I love the reviews, side note, of people talking about this book where they're like, it's so unrealistic. Like, a 17-year-old would never be elected into office. Congratulations, you're reading fiction. Which actually, this is so funny to me because all the people that are leaving these reviews saying, oh, it's not realistic, are adults. And they're saying that as if our generation wasn't raised on shows like Cory in the House. Like, oh, I'm sorry, are we suddenly now allergic to joy, happiness, and fun? Have we forgotten our whimsy and youth? I just remember that, which is really funny. That's all I wanted to say. I get what people mean, but at the same time, like, yeah, of course it would never happen in our current society with our current rules in place. But I think the explanation is thought out well enough to at least force you to suspend your disbelief, at least for a little bit. Because basically, when you're running for president, you have to hit a certain threshold of electoral votes. Surely I don't have to explain this to you, but we don't elect presidents based on the popular vote. It's not simply a matter of who gets the most votes. So, USA.gov official website says that to win the presidency, you need a minimum of 270 electoral college votes. So the explanation that we get in the book is that Benton hit that threshold. However, obviously, Benton is not 35. So everyone's like, okay, obviously, he can't be the president. He doesn't meet the requirements. So we're just going to disregard all the votes that were casted for him. The problem being that the two other candidates that were running for president, those were Mummer and Scully. Mummer was the Democratic candidate. Scully was the Republican candidate. Neither one of them had over 270 electoral college votes. So even if you got rid of all the votes for Benton, neither one of them still had enough votes to win the presidency. So reading that, I was like, okay, it makes sense to me. I can understand the line of thinking that like, oh, okay, these other candidates still don't meet the requirements. There still has to be a discussion on who will win the presidency. Ultimately, the Supreme Court decides because their job in the judicial branch is to interpret the Constitution. They decide that 35 is actually an arbitrary number, and they overturn that requirement to allow Benton to serve as president. And part of the reason that they made this decision was because of the global political pressure to do so. He actually started a separate political party known as the Revolting Youth. The Revolting Youth took hold in a number of other countries' elections, including Italy, France, the UK. I lost track of the countries I said. UK, Italy, Germany, France, Canada, I'm missing some people, Sweden, and Japan. I got it. It took me a second. I'm sorry, guys. I'm tired. So in the 7 countries, more teenagers are elected into office, which inevitably puts some pressure on the US Supreme Court to reinstate Benton as the president. So Benton's first order of business as commander-in-chief is to go to this summit in Sweden, known as the G8 Summit. This convention with the other young leaders of the 7 countries I mentioned are supposed to make a decision about this piece of land in the Arctic. Known as Dragontail, it's literally like a treasure trove of oil, metals, materials that could easily wipe out an entire country's debt. So their goal with this summit is to decide who owns it. Now, Benton is woefully unprepared to go into a summit of this magnitude and is quickly outnumbered by the other young leaders there. Benton, controversially, wants to leave the island alone because at this point in the story, there is a conspiracy theory, a rumor that beneath Dragontail, beneath this treasure trove, is a super volcano that could wipe out the earth if it's touched. Right now, the ice cap that's on top of it is essentially acting as a lid, so the minute they start drilling for oil, it will cause the entire thing to explode. So he is trying to convince his fellow young leaders to leave the island alone. However, and as a surprise to him, he is outnumbered, and they all decide that they're going to drill for the materials. But as they are making this decision, as they are talking out who gets what percentage of the spoils, one of the leaders is murdered, and the prime suspect is Benton. So the rest of the story follows Benton as he's trying to clear his name, trying to find a way to save Dragontail and save the world so that they don't blow it up, all while on the run from global entities trying to arrest him. Young World has been described as a red-hot political thriller, and I did not take that warning seriously. Reading this book genuinely got my heart racing. I was so invested. I was so genuinely stressed out. It's definitely very fast paced, especially once you get towards the end of the story. And honestly, I'll say the world building is one of the most compelling points for me in this whole story. Obviously, most of the story is based on the political system that we currently have, our government, our succession rules and stuff like that. But obviously, Dragontail, this G8 summit, other things like that, that's made up, but it's fleshed out really well. Where honestly, like I would stop the book and be like, damn, What are our politicians doing about Dragontail? Has Zoran Mandani addressed Dragontail? Like, what does he think about it? It doesn't exist. It's not real. Genuinely, I'm so serious. Like, I would put the book down and I would think that there was actually a super volcano in the Arctic, and who knows, maybe there is. My reality and this book were literally blending together. That was tripping me up. I'm not gonna lie. So that's the spoiler-free summary about this book. If you don't want to hear all the nitty-gritty details, I suggest clicking off this video now and rejoin me once you finish the book, because I do hope you read this book. I truly enjoyed it, and I would really recommend, if anything, you listen to the audiobook. I think it's so compelling. I was a little nervous because, as I mentioned, this book has illustrations throughout. So there's a lot of like visual aids throughout the book to kind of go off of. This is cool. And this is all like hand drawn. None of this is AI. This is amazing. And it was translated to the audiobook format really well. And overall, the audiobook was just so easy to follow along to. The narrator did a really good job of portraying like a young teenage voice. And I would recommend it. If you're going to read this book at all, listen to the audiobook. But with that out of the way, let's get into the rest of the video. What I really liked about this book is that it seems to be coming back to this message, this idea that is repeated throughout the book, which is the right to be young. What does that mean? What are you entitled to as a young person? At the start of the book, Benton says that the right to be young means that you don't worry about the world ending. You don't worry about snow still coming down in May, or rising prices, or things about the world. As a young person, the only thing you should be worried about is doing your homework and making sure you get to practice on time. The low-level stuff that you're supposed to enjoy in your adolescence. And I think, at least in my age range, like I'm still in that middle portion where, compared to the other adults that I surround myself, I'm still considered very young. But compared to like teenagers, I'm an adult, I'm old, like I'm a part of that group. So it's an interesting place to be in to read this kind of book, because I can understand that sentiment. For example, when the pandemic started, I was 18 years old. At that point in my life, I was like, the only thing I should really be concerned about is getting into college, what I'm gonna wear on my first day, how to navigate my classes for the next 4 years. And yet, I wasn't thinking about that. I was having to go to work, expose myself to a virus that no one knew anything about. I was having to reckon with my own mortality at 18 years old, which arguably I didn't think I should have had to. Also, growing up in an age where school shooter drills were becoming much more common, it's odd for me because I have a lot of older cousins that did not have to go through the kinds of things that I did when I was in school. I vividly remember in the last years of my high school experience, we had to do a full drill where it wasn't just turning off the lights, hiding under the desks. It was getting escorted out of the building by police, how you hold your hands up behind your head so they know that you're not a target, and having to move quickly and with the police so that they can evacuate you as safely as possible. That was the kind of drill that I had to run, and I'm 25. So I think I have a good mixture of both, where as an adult, I feel a lot of culpability. I feel the pressure when I go to cast my vote, when I am choosing my representatives. I know that I'm making decisions that are largely going to impact a future that I could very well not see. As an adult, I know that my words hold more weight. My presence has more of an impact if, for example, I went to a school board meeting. The things I say in a school board meeting could have more impact in a teenager's life than if they were to go to said meeting and speak on their own behalf. I know that. So the message of this book really deeply impacted me. Not only because I'm still relatively young enough where I remember what it's like to feel robbed of this youth that was always portrayed on television, like told to us through stories from our parents, our grandparents, whatever, right? But I also know that to a certain extent, I am also participating in the system that robs the youth of their right to be young. It's very conflicting. And it definitely gives me pause when I read a story like this. And what I really like about the way that this book approaches this idea, the right to be young, is that it goes through its own arc. Where at first, Benton is like, I don't want to have to think about politics. I shouldn't have to. I don't want to think about my own existence and my own mortality. I just want to be a kid. And then literally being thrown into this political system and having to grow up and having to own up to this responsibility, even though he is a kid, which is a very clear metaphor to what teenagers have to go through in today's world. We don't give them the opportunity to be young because we, as the adults, have failed them. The youth are supposed to put their trust in us as the adults, the responsible people in the room, to make responsible decisions, to cast our votes with the knowledge that it's going to have an impact on the future. It's up to us to make the right decisions so that they don't have to worry about it. But because we have failed to do so, because we have made these reckless decisions, we have given them no choice but to participate in the political system. We have made decisions on their behalf, decisions that they trusted us to make, that we were supposed to make responsibly, and we failed them. Which is why they don't have the right to be young, which is why they now have to speak on their own behalf. Which in this book, the metaphor is an extreme version of that. Because they no longer have the right to be young, they have to take office themselves so that they can advocate for themselves, so that they can actually have a say in their own futures. Ultimately, I don't think that this book is trying to say that kids shouldn't think about politics. It's not saying that they should never consider the world that they're living in. Honestly, I think it's saying the opposite, that everything about life is inherently political. And even if you're not necessarily participating in politics, you should know about what's going on in the world. Again, in my experience, the first time I ever really had to think about politics was in 2008. I remember my class did a mock election where we asked our family members who they were voting for. So that was the first time that I really had a conversation where I asked my parents, who are you voting for and why? It was the first time I had to think about things like that. The second time that I became very aware of politics and the political system was in 2016. Throughout high school, I was preoccupied with so many other things. I was worrying about whether or not I was going to pass my classes, doing homework, and then all of a sudden, on top of that, I'm having to consider the world around me. I'm having to consider that there is a person in office that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt should not be there. And the next 4 years are going to be full of decisions that I have no say in, that are going to change the course of my life potentially forever. And suddenly we're having to be aware of politics and not only what we believe, but what the people around us believe. I remember the years following 2016 where it was like suddenly you would hear the people around you and they're like, oh, we don't hang out with that person because they're a Trumpy. They're a Trump supporter. And that was something that we had to be aware of. And I remember at the time feeling like it was so sudden. I suddenly had to know what the world was like. I suddenly had to have an opinion on certain things in the world, things that I hadn't really had to consider prior to that point. Something that would eventually become a litmus test for my relationships with the people around me. Whether or not we agreed on certain topics, whether or not they thought that I had a right to exist as a Mexican person in the US. And suddenly, I didn't have the option of saying, oh, I don't do politics because politics was doing me. And fast. So ultimately, I think that's what the book is trying to say. At some point, you will have to know about these things. You will have to participate in the political system. Being ignorant and trying to ignore it will get you nowhere. It'll only allow the people in power to continue to take advantage of you and your ignorance. There is no doubt that as a young person, you should be entitled to certain freedoms. You should have the ability to go and hang out with your friends without worrying about the world falling apart. That is part of the right to be young, but the only way that you can secure that right is by giving power to the right people. Because that's another central theme about this book. When Benton is elected into office alongside these 7 other teenagers, he believes that they're going to make the world a better place. He thinks that they all get it, that they all have the same priorities as him, that they're all going to think about the future of their planet, that they're all going to do what's in the best interest of the youth, which is preserving said youth. So he is surprised when he gets to this G8 summit and they're all talking about Dragontail and how they all want to mine it. He's surprised when he tells everyone, hey, there's a super volcano under this thing. If we drill into it, the world will explode. And that deters no one. The only thing that these teenagers can think about is that their countries are in debt, and this one piece of land could very easily buy them out of all of it. They understand that power and money can eventually get them to their goals. They can use the money to invest in things like earth restoration, healthcare, eradicating student debt, which is specific to the US because I don't know how it is in the other countries, which these are all things that in theory they all want, but they also know at the same time that the only way they can get to that future is with money and power. This completely throws Benton for a loop. He doesn't understand how his fellow teenagers can't understand why saving the earth should be the highest priority. He can't understand why they don't agree with him. And for a good chunk of the book, it makes him feel hopeless and powerless. These people that he thought he could rely on are no better than the zombies. And yeah, maybe part of it is because he was being a little naive, but I think ultimately is that he was underestimating the effect of power. I think we can all understand that our society would not work if someone wasn't in power, if there weren't structures put in place to maintain the balance. And with any structure, there is a top. There is someone overseeing everything. So our job is to make sure that the people in power are the right kind of people. The people that will use that power responsibly and make decisions that benefit everyone. And ultimately, what Benton realizes is that just because they're young doesn't mean that they're going to use power responsibly. These world leaders were still held back by the previous structures of power that they inherited. They're still bending to these previously held ideas of imperialism and colonialism, and they were unable to see past that and think about the bigger picture like Benton was. When I was reading this book, it was definitely a roller coaster of emotions, and I specifically remember at some point in the book, Benton is telling everyone, hey, this volcano is going to wipe out the earth. It is not worth it. What's a couple $billion compared to an actual planet? Who's going to care that you lead a country that's not going to exist in a week from now? And these other teenagers, these world leaders, were simply saying, who cares? Like, they couldn't even see the absurdity of it, that getting out of debt was somehow better. It was somehow impactful, even if they would only be out of debt for like the 3 remaining days of existence that they had left. They could only look at the short term. Again, despite the fact that they're young. And largely, it was because they were still controlled by the adults. They were still working in that same framework, and they were underestimating their own ability to enact change, which is, again, a greater commentary on what it's like to be young in the US today. I'm going to loop myself in here, but we are constantly told that we don't have power. It's the grasshoppers versus the ants. Ants work for the grasshoppers, we give them half our food, and we are expected to live off the scraps. And even though we are plentiful, we have no power. That's what we're expected to believe. And unfortunately, that message still stays in so many people's minds. And it is only a select few of us, the most brave, courageous, and selfless of us, that are willing to push past these boundaries, to reject the status quo, reject these systems that are so clearly not working. And those of us that have the courage to imagine a better future for ourselves. And ultimately, that was the downfall of the other young leaders in this book. They were unable to see the bigger picture like Benton was. Maybe he was naive, maybe he didn't have all the resources to get to that future, but he had the vision. And he had hope. So by the end of the book, Benton is still president. He's still fighting zombies along the way. He's pushing back against all the geezers in office trying to get his bills passed. But ultimately, and slowly but surely, he is making change. And he is leading that charge for change with hope. All that to say, I think that this book has a very clear and poignant message, which is that if you want a good future for yourself, you need to take charge of it. You need to participate. You can't afford to stick your head in the sand. You can't allow these people to make decisions for you. At some point, you need to wake up. At some point, you need to participate in the world. Being young does not mean that you stay ignorant. Being young does not mean that you allow the world to make decisions for you. It means that you get to enjoy the pleasures of youth. Yes, you have your relationships, you have your schoolyard crushes, you get to worry about homework and midterms and AP tests and everything like that. But it's one that you can only allow yourself to enjoy when the world around you is safe. And the only way that you can ensure a safe world is by making sure that the people in power are people that you trust. It's a never-ending cycle. If you want a safe and happy world, you need to create it, which is ultimately what the message of this book was, and I think a message that was very clearly and effectively delivered. I will say that despite the intensity of the book and some of the darker aspects, it is very much hope core. It's empowering the youth and telling them that they have the ability to become Benton Young if they want. If we've learned nothing in the past couple of years, especially in Nepal, The Youth Have Power. I would recommend this book solely based on that political message alone. I think it's so impactful, and I can see all the heart and effort that went into this book. I think it was executed beautifully. You know what? If this video does well, which I hope it does, I'll use all the ad money to buy copies of this book, and I'll just distribute it into little libraries. So if you want to help support that mission, be sure to watch this video all the way through. Share it, like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. But wait, Kristen, you say, the video can't be over. You're supposed to talk about the controversial parts. Yeah, I'm getting there. I just gave glowing praise to this book, and I still do think it's great. But there is one part of the book that sticks out to me, something that I do have to address, which is the inappropriate relationship between our main character and his teacher. As I mentioned at the beginning of the book, Benton refers to this girl that he likes as the girl for the first quarter. Afterwards, he tells us her name is Jess, but he kind of buries the lead. There is one devious, diabolical chapter where the author makes you think that the girl that Benton likes is his freshman stepsister. I was like, oh, please no. I ain't never prayed in my life, and I was damn near on my knees in the church pew. I'm like, please, I like this book so much. Don't give me a Sweet Home Alabama right now. Thankfully, that was not the case. They just give you a little jump scare before Benton is like, God, no. Why would anyone think that I like my stepsister? And I was like, okay. You had me there in the first half, I'm not gonna lie. He's like, no, it's not my stepsister. It's my teacher. So we find out 50% of the way through the book that the girl that started it all, the girl that called him a do-nothing, told him he doesn't stand for anything, the reason he made the video, the reason he ran for president, the reason he's where he's at today is actually his history teacher. Sorry, I think it's his AP Gov teacher, if I'm not mistaken. And the reason that people were up in arms is because prior to this point in the book, Benton gives us some instances that he shared with this girl, particularly on election day when he went to the school to cast his vote. This girl met him in the teacher's lounge and they kissed. Again, his teacher, who is 27, and him, who is 17. Now, I'm going to ask you to hear me out, okay? I am not condoning inappropriate relationships. I would never condone a relationship between an adult and a child, and neither does this book. Hear me clearly, neither does this book nor the author. That is not what is happening here. Not even remotely, in my opinion, based on my interpretation. The biggest thing that I need to point out is that Benton Young is an unreliable narrator. He lies to us as the reader frequently. Case in point, he buried the lead on the identity of his love interest. He did not tell us who she was. He was intentionally withholding that information as the narrator of our story. He's a liar. He's not being entirely honest with us as the reader. So with that knowledge, I don't think that all of these instances that he tells us that he shared with this girl are real. So there's some instances in the first half of the book that we later find out aren't exactly true as the way Benton described it to us. For example, in the first half, shortly after he's elected president, he finds out from one of his friends that the girl he likes posted a picture of him on his Instagram account with the caption, "Our President." So Benton essentially deludes himself into thinking, oh, this girl is into me, like she posted a picture of me. Again, at this point in time, we don't know it's his teacher. Later, come to find out that that wasn't what happened at all. Later on in the book, Miss Escobedo and Benton are talking to each other. The context of this conversation is essentially Benton chose her to be his Secretary of Education. So they're both in Sweden for this conference. They get locked in a bathroom because they're chased by a polar bear. Again, you just have to read it. I can't really explain it that well. But essentially, Benton confronts her on these unrequited feelings and basically accuses her of having these feelings and lying about it. And he's just trying to say that they should be together, and he confesses his feelings for her. And he brings up this supposed Instagram post. He tells her, hey, you're giving me mixed messages. You're telling me we can't be together, but you posted a picture of me on your Instagram and said that I was your president. So what's up with that? We find out from Miss Escobedo that that's not what happened at all. She is the AP Gov teacher. So she put a poster of him in their classroom, which she did for every president, not because she had romantic feelings for him. So that's already a lie. Now, there is one instance that I think most people are having an issue with, which is On election day, Benton was in the teacher's lounge at his school getting ready to cast his ballot when the girl, again at this point we don't know it's his teacher, comes into the teacher's lounge and kisses him. Rightfully, you hear grown woman kissing child. Bad, logically so. But allow me to read that portion where the supposed kiss happens, and maybe you'll understand why I have a little bit of doubt when it comes to whether or not this kiss actually happened. Benton says, "Someone's there, waiting for me. Her, the girl, the two of us in the empty lounge. I tried to talk to you for weeks. You won't answer my messages," I sputter. "I know you think we can't be together, but I did all this for you. I wanted to prove it to you, that I'm not a do-nothing, that I'm worth being with, that I'm..." She kisses me, her hands touching my chest, the taste of strawberry fields, before she lets go, my heart still in my mouth. By the time I open my eyes, she's gone, slipping by the sea of cameras that flash at me through the closing door, all none the wiser. Now, when I read that the first time, that sounds like a kiss, right? I didn't have any reason to think that this would eventually become weird. But then you find out that that's supposed to be his teacher. And like any rational person, you're concerned. I was concerned. So when he confronts her about this kiss that they shared, she says, "I did not kiss you in the faculty lounge." She jumps to standing, a long nail pointed at me. "It was a frantic moment, photographers, so many people. You're misremembering what happened." Benton, "What you are accusing me of is very serious. I could lose my job, my career, even my freedom. That day at school, I was proud of you for what you did, for caring about what I taught you, for doing something with your life, which made me feel like I'd done something with mine. The way a good student should make a teacher feel. In that moment, you became like family. And like family, who knows? Maybe I gave you a quick kiss the way I give my nephew." And this is where I ask that you guys give me your interpretations and your opinions on this situation. Because to me, I don't think that this is real. At the very least, I don't think it happened the way Benton is telling us it did. Because from the first scene that I read, when Benton says that they kiss, he doesn't specify that they're kissing on the mouth. And to play the devil's advocate a little bit, Miss Escobedo is Hispanic, and I myself am Mexican. So I will tell you that sharing a kiss between family members or friends is not weird. Granted, not a kiss on the lips. So when she mentions that she kissed him like she would her nephew, I interpreted that as like, oh, it was a kiss on the cheek or a forehead. Now, is that still crossing a boundary? Is that still inappropriate? Yeah. But again, I don't think that this book is trying to excuse it or say that it is appropriate for what they were doing or for the circumstances that they were in. Again, Benton is not being honest with us as the reader. He is not being clear about these situations as they're happening. Like when you go back and reread some of the portions from the beginning of the book, it's clear that he's, I don't want to say hallucinating, but he's making things up that aren't there. Because in his mind, he sees her as basically another student, another appropriately aged girl that he can have a crush on. There's a moment, for example, when he first sees her in class and he's trying to talk to her, and then his friends pull him away, and he notes that she's talking to another student, but he makes it seem like, oh my God, like what does he have that I don't have? And in the moment when you're reading it, it's like, oh yeah, some other dude is trying to like flirt with her. But then afterwards, when you have the context that it's his teacher, it sounds more like, oh, another student is talking to his teacher, probably about homework or an upcoming test, and there's nothing else to it. So it's clear that Benton is not seeing things as they are. Another reason I think he's not being truthful with us is later on in the book, after he reveals that it's his teacher that's his love interest, he tells us that he doesn't really talk to his friends about it because the first time he did, they called him out. So he tells us the conversation he had with his friends when he first brings up the idea of having a crush on his teacher. She's only 27. Is 10 years even a big deal? Jesus Christ, I thought you had a lame-ass crush like Collar Bellin and half the lacrosse team, Freddie growled back. But you actually think you have a chance with our AP Gov teacher? I mean, everyone crushes on a teacher at some point. Jack sympathized. Miss Escobedo better not know you're this into her, Freddie snapped. Ever watched a Lifetime movie? The only way this ends is with one of you in jail. After that, I didn't tell them about anything that happened. So he mentions to us that he doesn't really talk to his friends about his feelings towards his teacher after this initial confrontation. And yet, in the beginning part of the story, it sounds like they're having more conversations about it, that they're more aware about his true feelings towards his teacher. So we're having contradictions from Benton, which again, just lead me to believe that he's lying. Not only are there some inconsistencies in his story, but there's also clear boundaries that Miss Escobedo is putting up with Benton. When he's telling it to us in the beginning of the story, it sounds like this girl is just like, for lack of a better term, playing hard to get. She's not paying attention to him. She's not giving him the time of day. She's not really showing an interest in him. He mentions that he would text her through school and she would never respond, or if she did, it would be one-word responses. He really didn't have an opportunity to spend time with her, and the only way that he was able to was by crashing her volunteer hours at the zoo. Again, when you read that first part without the context of who this girl is, it just sounds like Benton's a little lovesick puppy. He's after this girl that maybe isn't that interested in him, but he's putting in the effort. But then with the context that this is his teacher, it gives us more color into why she was acting that way. Suddenly, it's not a girl playing hard to get, it's a teacher that's putting up boundaries. A teacher that is trying to put distance between herself and this student, who is clearly not getting the message. She tells him straight up to his face, "I am not dating you, Benton, no matter how much you confess your love in your journals and dig through my profiles and follow me around zoos. I put up with your crush and flirtations because you are sweet and smart and self-aware, and I never thought you were serious, but clearly I was wrong, and you need to stop this and pull yourself together. You are young and I am an adult, and there are clear lines between those things." So it's pretty clear that from Miss Escobedo's characterization that she's not interested in Benton. She was in no way trying to pursue him, and anything that he's saying might not be truthful. There's even a portion in that conversation where prior to that moment he kissed her, and this was like post almost dying from a polar bear, and he says, "Hey, but you kissed me back." And after he accuses her of kissing him back, she's like, "That's not a question." Like, she doesn't address it. And to the untrained eye, it would seem like, oh, she's not denying it, so therefore that's how it happened. She did kiss him back. She was trying to pursue him. But again, in my interpretation, in my perspective, it's more so that she knows that she's not going to get through to him. He clearly is having some delusion about their relationship with each other. And no matter how much she tries to convince him that it's not real, he's not seeing it. Obviously, their entire conversation up to this point has been her telling him, "I'm not interested in you. I'm your teacher. You're my student. You're a child. I could never see you that way." And he's not getting the message. So trying to convince him that she wasn't kissing him back would just put them back in this loop. Like, they were never going to get on the same page. She could never convince him. I think that this relationship and this infatuation that Benton has with this teacher is meant to be a metaphor for the complicated relationship that Benton shares with his mom. So there's a conversation towards the end of the book that Benton has with his mom, and this is at a point where he's really at an all-time low. He's just finished running from the Indian Prime Minister. He was about to be killed by the Prime Minister, and he's rescued by his Secret Service agent, his mom, and he is just feeling hopeless. He's feeling like the world is literally going to end because it's about to. And they're on a plane escaping India, and Benton says this, "Mom, what if I was wrong? What if there is no right to be young anymore? Not once you know the truth, that the future is already here, raging under our feet, ready to explode, and no one's coming to save us, which means it has to be us. It has to be me. I just don't know how." They then transition to his love life, and his mom says, "Jugs told me it wasn't her." Jugs is his stepsister. "The girl you're in love with says it was someone else." Dad's confused then. "Who was it?" "I wait for shame. That wound I've been carrying a very long time. But instead, another feeling comes. Gentle, tentative, like water lapping to a shore. Forgiveness. Someone I loved because they were out of reach, I say." Which is ultimately what I think that this relationship was supposed to be for this book. It's a reflection of the relationship that he has with his mother, someone who he loves and is also out of reach. For context, his mother divorced his father and left them for a new family. She got remarried, she has stepchildren, and she doesn't necessarily like spending time with her son. When Benton is elected president, she takes advantage of the situation. She's going on interviews even when his dad isn't. Then when they finally have dinner together post getting elected, she calls him an asshole. Like, she just speaks very badly towards her son. She is not acting like the adult in the room. And we see how this has an impact on Benton. He so desperately craves the love of his mother, and she simply will not give it to him, which is then impacting the way he sees fantasies, romantic relationships. He is also pursuing another woman that he can't have, another woman who is out of reach, another person that can't give him the love that he so desperately wants. And it is only after he's forced to grow up and take responsibility for his future that he's able to forgive his mother, that he allows himself to accept her love and accept her shortcomings for the sake of their relationship. And it's also what lets him let go of those feelings that he had for his teacher. By the end of the story, she's no longer the Secretary of Education. They now have a proper teacher-student relationship. And he's seeing her clearly for the first time, not as someone that had romantic feelings for him, but someone that believed in him. So ultimately, I think that's what a lot of people are missing in this book. It's not trying to say that their relationship is right. The book is not endorsing this relationship. In this instance, it's being used as a metaphor. It's obviously taken to a very extreme and polarizing place, but it's meant to do that. It's meant to make you think, and it's meant to be a little controversial. But it's when you read the book closely, it's when you look at the details and the evidence that you realize that maybe you're not interpreting it the way that it's actually being portrayed. Maybe, like Benton, you're not seeing it clearly. Once you realize that he's an unreliable narrator, that he's lying to us for a good portion of the book, you're able to discern reality from his fantasy. And ultimately, I do think that it's communicated very clearly in multiple points throughout this book that this relationship is wrong. If it were to exist, adults should never pursue children, teachers should never pursue their students, and at no point does she ever entertain that this could actually happen. Truly, this is a matter of portrayal versus endorsement, and in this instance, it's simply portraying a relationship that's not even real. This is all imagined in Benton's mind. None of it is actually happening. So while I understand why people had the initial reaction of saying like, hey, this book is problematic, I don't think it is. Again, I'm willing to hear people out if they have other interpretations. This is just what I thought after reading the book and really looking at the details and rereading some of the sections. Because when I looked at all the 1-star reviews and they're all talking about this inappropriate relationship, I really worried that I was not interpreting the book the same way that other people were. I thought I was missing something. So I've come to the conclusion that ultimately Benton is an unreliable narrator. The book intentionally kind of misleads you about certain situations and certain instances that Benton shares with his teacher. But ultimately, once you finish the book, I think it's clear that none of it was really happening. At least not in the way Benton is trying to tell us it did. Like, is it controversial? Yes. Is it polarizing? Absolutely. But with a book of this nature, I wouldn't expect the author to pull back his punches. At the end of the day, this is a 17-year-old kid. These are teenagers, and the book is sure to remind us of that. The last thing I'll say is that I know some people had issue with the age range on this book. Some people were saying that it was inappropriate for YA, and the only thing I'll say is that when you look at the back of the book, right, like this huge blurb that you couldn't possibly miss, it says, a teenage president, a global revolution, a shocking murder, power, secrets, sex, lies, betrayal, welcome to young world. That's the tagline. It tells you that there is sex in this book. And I'm going to say that a lot of people were like, oh my God, like sex doesn't actually happen on the page, but it gets really close. Congratulations. You now understand what a fade to black scene is. You're a little behind the curve, but nowadays in YA, a fade to black is perfectly normal. Like, am I a little uncomfortable with it? Yeah. But at the same time, like I have to remind myself, I'm an adult reading YA. I feel uncomfortable because I'm an adult reading about children. But the intended audience for this book is other teenagers who don't think that that's weird. Again, with the knowledge and understanding that nothing graphic on the page happens. As long as we don't pass that boundary, I think we're okay. Because realistically, we can't have a book about teenagers and try to imply that they're not at least somewhat curious about each other. Like, I think it's funny that this book is about 8 political leaders around the world coming together in Sweden, mostly unsupervised, and people were surprised that they weren't like having messy relationships with each other. Like, we know what happens in Olympic Village. You know, you have some of the best athletes across the world, all in peak physical health. I mean, who are we kidding? They're all hot and they're all together. What did we think was going to happen? You put teenagers with the power of an entire country in their hands and expected nothing to happen? Come on now. Like, look at the cover. This is an upside down Capitol building. Then you have revolution, murder, sex, betrayal, and all this other stuff. And you're going to tell me that you're surprised that they cuss? Come on now. As an adult that reads YA, I've just kind of accepted that it's skewing older. This is a 17-year-old kid. It has more adult-ish themes. But would I recommend it to the 12-year-olds that are supposed to be included in the YA age range? Probably not. Again, I don't think that this book is inappropriate for the intended audience. I think it's fine. It doesn't cross any boundaries. And honestly, like, it's not that crazy compared to some other YA books that I've read. I think, controversially, I think it's kind of tame. Again, who am I? Like, I'm an adult reviewing YA books. I'm not the intended audience. I think for us as adults to be arguing about whether or not it's age appropriate takes away from the conversation that the book is supposed to be having with young readers. Ultimately, the message and the empowerment of youth is what we need to focus on. I give this book a 5 out of 5. I thoroughly enjoyed my experience reading the book. The plot, the pacing, everything was amazing. And knowing that this author is so committed to this vision of getting the youth empowered in politics makes me feel so much better about supporting said author. I will happily recommend this book to everyone I ever meet. I will buy more copies and put them in the hands of readers myself if I have to. Like, this author created an entire website to help the youth get registered to vote, pre-registered to vote, find out more about local government, run for local government. Who else is doing that? That's what I mean when I talk about the responsibility and the privilege that it is to be a YA author. To know that you're directly touching the lives of youth across the country and knowing that you can have the impact on them, knowing that you could be the person that inspires the next president of the United States. That's amazing. And I'm so happy that I picked up this book, and I'm so happy I liked it, honestly. I've never read any books from this author, so this was a very pleasant surprise. Anyway, that's the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Again, this book is inherently very controversial, very polarizing, so I encourage you to let me know what you think. If you've read it already, if you're interested in reading it, what you think about the more controversial aspects of the story. Let me know all in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and you can follow me on all my other social media at Listen to Kristen on TikTok, Instagram, and Goodreads. I've been talking for a very long time. I'm hungry. I'm gonna get some late night Chipotle. Honestly, guys, I was kind of in a reading slump on top of being so goddamn busy, so I'm glad I started out with this book. Hopefully, I'll be back to my normal posting schedule after this, and hopefully I'll have more good books to review for you guys. I'm gonna have to find a good place to put this on my shelf because it really does suck out all the color from my recording session. Like, I feel like I look pale and gray compared to the book. But anyway, that's the end of my video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. And hopefully by the next time, I will have cut my bangs because these are atrocious. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.